Well, in the meantime, our next speaker is our dear colleague at the University of the Basque Country, Eider Gómez, who holds a bachelor's degree in English Studies from this university. And after graduating, she started working on her PhD, and she got her Certificate of Advanced Studies in Compared Literature and Literary Science with a dissertation studying the ways of resisting trauma during the Second World War. And in the conferences she took part in, she presented papers dealing with trauma and the Japanese Americans. And at the moment, she's working on her PhD thesis dealing with gender views on trauma during the Second World War. So whenever you're ready, Eider, we can start.
Yes, give me 1 minute.
Yeah.
So you choose me here.
No problem. Okay.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eider Gómez. Thank you for the introduction. And well, I'm going to speak in this presentation about how Ben and Tommy's parents' silence affected their children in David Mura's novel, The Famous Suicides of the Japanese Empire. During my presentation, in the first part, I will give you some historical background about what happened at that time. Then I will continue explaining briefly the Sansei Research Project, which is about the intergenerational trauma, only to continue with the analysis. I will give in this analysis some aspects, some effects, that were mentioned in this project, as well as giving some examples from the novel. Only to conclude, and then show you, of course, the reference list. Now, prior to World War II, Yasuko Takesawa mentions in his book, Breaking the Silence, that many Japanese Americans went to the West, Japanese went to the West, and so they were the first generation. Okay, well, introduction, let's skip it. They were the first generation, that is the Issei. They had no right to having any American citizenship or even owning a property. However, they decided to stay in the United States, and this gave the opportunity to their children, then say the second generation, of having the American citizenship. The Sansei, the last generation that you can see in there, the third one, is the one that my presentation is going to be focused on. Now, everything changed with the Pearl Harbor surprise attack, and also when the executive order 9066 issued by President Roosevelt, which meant that all those of Japanese ancestry were to be removed from their homes and imprisoned in Japanese internment camps. These camps led them to feel uncertainty and also to lose most of their belongings. When they were told that they had to go to the camps, they only took that fitted in their bags, in their suitcases, and the uncertainty part was because they were not told where they were going, for how long, or what the government intended to do with them once they were loaded in trains and buses. The camps were bounded by barbed wire, patrolled by the military police, and they had guard towers with searchlights. They were located in deserts and wetlands, and this gave rise to those who lived there to have several because of the sanitary conditions and the weather of the place, to feel sick most of the times. These camps also made them to lose their privacy, as they had to bathe, for instance, in communal facilities, and they also lost their traditional Japanese family relationships, as well as the different roles that the Japanese families had. Furthermore, those inmates who were 17 or older had to were required to fill in the questionnaire, a loyalty questionnaire imposed by the government. In this questionnaire, there were two questions which were really important. Question 27, which aimed to know the willingness of the Nisei and the Issei to fight for the United States Army, and question 28, which basically was that they had to forswear any kind of alliance to Japan and its emperor, and swear alliance to the United States. Most of the incarcerees replied yes to both questions. However, there were others who replied no. They were known as the no-no boys, and they were taken to a two-lake camp, which was a more restrictive camp for those who resisted the draft. Now, I would like to start mentioning a little bit about the Sansei Research Project. As you can see, that one over there is Donna Nagata, who is the one who thought about the Sansei Research Project. Basically, because there was not much empirical research on the effects of the internment on the Sansei. The Sansei Research Project, from now on SRP, was conducted in 1987, and it surveyed over 700 Sansei from across the United States, whose parents were both interned, or either one or no parent was interned. Through this project, Nagata and her team gained extra knowledge about the historical event as well as the effects that it had on the Sansei. Now, the analysis. As the focus of my presentation is David Mura's novel, I wanted to use the Sansei Research Project basically because we can see both on Ben and Tommy the different intergenerational effects that Nagata mentions in it. The first one is that of silence, the silence of their parents, which caused them, the offspring, not to have the knowledge that they deserve to know about their parents' past. The conversations were described by those who took part in the project as cryptic, oblique, and evasive, or limited only to brief humorous before and after camp anecdotes. This was a result of the silence that the Nisei and the Issei decided to keep in order not to relive the traumatic memories of the camp and to protect their children from the burden of knowing what happened. The avoidance and detachment that they presented was a symptom of the post-traumatic stress disorder, which Kashima links to the social amnesia, as they decided as a whole group to suppress the experience. Therefore, their children, therefore, this became a coping mechanism against the trauma caused by the incarceration and the racist realities of the larger society. This first intergenerational effect can be found in the novel when Ben goes to the West from the very beginning, at the very first chapter, goes to the West Coast in order to get more information for his novel, the novel that he's writing about suicides, and also to understand his parents and brother. It is at that moment that he states, what you can read on that quote, that he did not understand his or his parents' past for all the silence and secrecy that surrounded it, which set in turn a familial distance between the members of the family. Another example is the silence of his mother, Kimiko Ohara, or later on Kimiko Richards. Every time Ben asked her about the Japanese-American history, the mother always avoided answering those questions. By avoiding answering those questions, she was setting barriers between her son and herself in order not to relieve the pain and humiliation that she felt when she was interned. Ben wrote this on his book, which gives examples of how his mother replied to him. As for their father, Takeshi Ohara, he did not tell anything about his camp experience. The only things that he mentioned about his past were how he met their mother and the grapes incident. That is, when a white man stole grapes from his father's farm, and so that man was led unpunished in order to avoid any kind of future outcomes against the Japanese Americans of that farm. Sorry. Now, another aspect that was mentioned in the project was that those Sansei felt sad and incomplete with the silence of their parents. This can be found in this quote that Ben writes on his novel. This puzzle is the one that he has been trying to complete and was not able to do so until the very end, when he went to Hard Mountain Camp or when he read the letter that his mother wrote. He felt frustrated, okay, for all the silence that his parents kept about what happened in the camps. And this could be linked to what those who took part in the project felt that they will never know all the pain that their parents felt. Now, the second effect that I want to deal with is a double one, the interest in the topic and the source of information. The source of information when asked, the source of information where the senseis first got that information, Nagata mentions in her book Legacy of Injustice that when they were asked about it, they said that they had an interest from the very beginning, from the early stages until young adulthood. This can be perceived in Ben, who is the main character, as he wanted to know more about his parents' past and what caused them so much pain and sadness in order to keep them silent. And this led him to write his novel, as you can see, which is about suicides. Later on, you will understand why it is important. Now, regarding the source, the first source of information, the sensei who took part in the survey, in the project, mentioned that it was their parents. As for the secondary source of information, it could be said that Ben went to the west to Hard Mountain Camp in order to find more information about his father, where he was labeled as a no-no boy for defending his rights. He found this information by reading articles, books, and documents that he got in the Japanese American National Museum archives or the Museum Store Camp. This is also linked to the project, as the sensei who were interviewed also said that their secondary source, when their parents didn't want to answer their questions, was by reading books, watching films about the internment, or listening to the conversations between their relatives and the parents. It is important to mention that in the knowledge section of the survey, the sensei got really low marks because of the limited communication and also because of the lack of coverage, as not many books talked about this event. Another explanation of this low knowledge could be that the sensei do not remember being exposed to the information, and this is the case of the brothers. Ben got pieces of information, and Tommy in the end, from their father. When he told them about the case of Heike and Priest Satsumori, who was beheaded by the Kumagai, through this story, their father told them about the shame that he felt and also focused on the Empress Heike, who lost everything and who regretted not having died in the same way as those who died in battle or those who committed suicide, because she lost everything, her previous glory, everything. Their father also told Ben, in this case, about a book of coins and his collection of marbles that he had to bury when they had to move suddenly and he couldn't take much with him. As for their mother, Kimiko, it is in this part of the novel where she just said something about the camp, basically living in a barn, okay, just because those who were in the camps had to live in a kind of a barn. She got really angry when her son compared it, said that it was something cool, and so she told him that it was not as cool as he thought it was. She also wrote a letter, the last letter that she sent to Ben. In there, she told him about her past, part of her past, and how his father was a no-no boy. The next effect that I want to mention, okay. So this one, let's go with this one. This reminds me of Hamlet because Ben got more information, pieces of information from his father's ghost, where he told him about his experience in the camp and how he became a no-no boy, and he also told him to tell the story so as not to be forgotten. Now, yes, the next intergenerational effect that I want to mention is that of violence and crimes. one respondent who was surveyed by Nagata mentioned that many of his friends had some problems with drugs and delinquency, and they also avoided being with other Japanese Americans just because they had problems socializing. This is not the case with the brothers, I mean the socializing part, or even avoiding being with other Japanese, but they had problems with drugs and delinquency. Now, let's start with Ben. Ben stole several times several things, such as chocolate and candies in the Jeep store, okay, which is the neighborhood store. He was caught twice by the police, and the police officer gave him a warning not to do it again, while the second time he told him about the reform sentence. At that time, Ben didn't care much about the sentence. The next time that he stole something were the coins from his cousin. This time his father made him return those coins and apologize to his cousin. Then he continued with his theft cycle, let's say it, by stealing money from his mother's purse. However, what changed him was when he fought and cut Michael Nagata, the other Japanese American in the neighborhood. He cut him, there. And this made him to be sent to a juvenile detention center, only to be transferred to St. Jude's Home for Boys, which he compared to a prison with no escape. Another time that he fought was against racism. That racism that was shown by some white truck drivers who decided to insult him while he was having dinner or eating in his car, and this in turn made Ben punch the said man. This fight, this adult fight, could be seen as his way of showing his right of being equal to the rest and treated the same way and not insulted. As for Tommy, there was a time when he was with his brother, and they were going to get dinner, and so three men approached them. They insulted them, and then the one who faced them was Tommy, who took a switchblade out and pressed it on one of the man's neck. He told this to his brother after his brother asked him about the reason behind his behavior, and Tommy reproached Ben, his change in behavior, and how the United States was behaving against all the racism, etc., basically that they did nothing. This shows that Ben would fight against what happened to their parents, that is, the internment were it to happen again, which is another intergenerational effect that I couldn't add to this presentation. The next one is that of drug abuse and alcohol, which Nagata linked to a low self-esteem, self-consciousness, and heightened identity issues. In the case of the brothers, both of them had drug problems. Ben, for his part, started doing drugs when he was at college, and then later on stopped doing them when he got older. And Tommy was the one who continued doing drugs even after having this argument with his brother when he went to Japan. Now, following what Nagata mentioned in her book, Legacy of Injustice, it could be said that their past was the main reason why they started doing drugs, which in the brothers' case, it could be, but also because they tried to forget about other problems, such as the white man with the hat who offered candies to the boys when they were children, and also Brother McConnell, who tried to abuse Ben when he was in St. Jude's Home for Boys. From my point of view, Tommy's continuous doing drugs was his way of forgetting of the past, not only his parents' silence, but also what happened with the white man with the hat. Next is that of suicide, but I would like to mention that Nagata in her project mentioned the premature death of the Nisei, which those who were interviewed linked to the internment, to the trauma caused by the internment. The first one to commit suicide was their father, who was in an institution when he committed suicide using a razor blade. The next one is Tommy, or Tommy's vanishing. Now, this vanishing, some people might speculate that it was because of the past, his parents' silence, or because of the man in the hat who might have sexually assaulted him when he was a child, as Tommy told Ben that he went to his house once, or it could also be because of the different dimensions that he so much loved to talk. However, I linked this vanishing, this suicide, because the police didn't find his body or anything, to his way of trying to forget his past, which linked to what his father did. The last intergenerational effect that I want to mention, but it was not in the project, is that of the silence of the sensei, as Ben did not tell much about his family to Grace when they were dating. He did not tell her about his father's suicide or his mother remarrying, knowing that maybe she wouldn't have married him if she knew everything about his family. It is as if the silence followed him and he mimicked what his parents did in order to face the trauma. As a conclusion, I would like to say that David Mura's novel covers the different effects of intergenerational trauma, which can be found in Donna Nagata's Sensei research project. As a final note, I will say that silence was a resistance method for the Issei and Nisei, but it became a double-edged weapon as their children did not understand their parents' behavior and not much about their origins. This is the list of references, and I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Eider, for this wonderful presentation and wonderful topic indeed. I wonder if there are any questions from the audience. Okay. Or well, I just have to. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
I have a question for Irati. You talked about how it seems, or like there were two different versions, how Faulkner treated the bird. So I was wondering, as you mentioned it, if the treatment of Native Americans changes in each of those versions, because you mentioned that they were nameless or something like that.
Yeah, there are some characters that are Native Americans, and okay, I'm going to divide my speech in two. So with the bear, for example, the completely changes basically, because in the first one it's a minor character, he has no name, nothing, and in verses 2 and 3 the bear is super important. It basically is the thing that keeps the plot moving. In the case of the other characters, the main character is Native American. So that's also important to say. And in one of the versions, if I remember it well, it was the second one, the second or the third, but more potentially the second, the boy befriends Native American. I mean, it's not described actually like he is Native American, but you can tell it, like you can guess, you know, from what is happening, and also his situation economically, also the way he has been raised. So you can know about it. And in his case, he does have a name because he's really important for the plot. And in that case, in that version, it's really important because at the end something happens with him and also the bear. I'm not going to tell more, but just in case. And also there are more Native American characters. But they have no name, even though they are part from that group, you know? So yeah, that's kind of interesting. In my head, at first I understood it because the story focuses on the relationship between the boy that starts to hunt as a kind of process of I'm growing up. and the bear. Like there is like this magical sort of connection. So I understood it, but at the same time, I thought that it was really revealing, that situation, to be honest. So yeah, it's interesting to analyze that from that part. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And you could say like some kind of relationship between Native Americans and the bear, or?
It could be.
Yeah.
In fact, I mean, these short stories have been analyzed a lot. There is lots of works that try to see what the killing of the bear means, for example, you know, but all the time from a metaphorical perspective of the animal, which is what I'm trying to avoid. But yeah, there are lots of works that try to do that. And okay, what was your question? Sorry. Yeah.
No, if you could see what
Yeah.
a kind of different.
Yeah, yeah, and in some of these works that analyze this portrayal of the bear, they connect the bear, the treatment, one of the versions, like the killing of it, as a sort of conquer. You know, we have conquered wilderness, and so the bear would be like a symbol of that too. So yeah, of course, it can be interpreted that way. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I have sort of a question
Yeah.
or something that's in my head. So, yeah, you were talking about killing the bear and conquering it, and you were also talking about the opposition between culture and nature, and how hunting is seen as a way of blending with nature. But if hunting implies killing animals,
Yeah.
isn't that blending with nature kind of problematic?
Yeah.
And again, exerting that anthropocentrism?
Yeah, of course. Like all these aspects that I analyze are basically from the perspective of a critical perspective. So basically, for us, we use a killing of a bear to symbolize like this. Yeah, we have returned to nature, and we are this, we are animals too. But that's not necessary. Why do you use another creature to return to nature? Because, you know, so that's basically my point. Like, we use all the like methods that actually are not really clear, and they are contradictions, to be fair. Or, for example, literary works that defend non-human animals, but then you animalize them all the time. How are we going to represent them in a good way if you don't experiment other ways? So that's basically my point, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's time, and I think, yeah, there's a book presentation and at the Aula Magna, so thank you for these really wonderful presentations, and good luck with your dissertations.
Yeah.